What up, what up, what up? I'm Matthew Msingati, the designer and developer. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Coded Design, where I teach coding and user interface design. In this video, we're gonna be tackling MVC. Don't forget that this video is part of a series, Real Life Applications in PHP, where I show you everything in this accounting application that I'm developing. Back end, front end, the database, the mistakes, the planning, and the user interface design behind the scene. So let's get to it. What is MVC? MVC, it's a pattern that is centered around the structure of your application. So the idea behind MVC is that is the separation of consent. It's like your layers need to be separated. Let's say in when you're designing an application, you've got three layers. You've got the user interface, that's layer number one. You've got the business logic, and you've got also the database layer. So those are the three layers. So the whole concept behind MVC, I can say in essence, it's all about the separation of consents. That if this part of your application can be a standalone to this one, and this one can be a standalone to this one. And also the MVC pattern, I think it talks to, or at least it relates a little bit to S of the solid principle, where S stands for single responsibility. As much as in terms of single responsibility principle, it might look like it's more concerned about classes, that your class must have a single responsibility, or your method must have a single responsibility. I think there is some sort of a relationship between a single responsibility principle and an MVC in this manner. MVC, it's all about making sure that the view, which is the UI, the user interface part of your app, is only concerned about being a view. It doesn't really know much about how to query data from the database. And then the controller, the one that acts as an engine or the intelligent part of your code, it must strictly deal with that intelligence. It must not be aware of the views, or it must not include the views in its own modules. It might be aware of the views as things that are external, as independent agents, that it will use them whenever it wants to. It's only aware in that sense, but in terms of inside it, the construction or the bits and pieces of it, it doesn't have any code or any piece of code that relates to a view, or that is a view. And also when it comes to the model, it's more like a piece of code that deals with connecting to the database. It's directly connected to the database. So the reason why I'm saying MVC, it relates to the single responsibility principle, because if you look at it, the HTML of your code, which is the view in this case, in our case, only specializes on what it does best, or for what it is to become an HTML, and only serve one purpose: to display information, not to go and search around information through the entire app and make decision. So some people refer to the view as a dumb layer. Yeah, well, it must be dumb in a sense that it must not be intelligent. It must not know how to make a lot of complex calculations and whatever. The only thing that it can do, it must display information. The controller, it's for making deciding what needs to be done and what needs not to be done based on what it has received from the view. What resources would maybe the class need before it's instantiated, and all those things. And then from then also, what sort of database information or tables that this view needs before it sends back the information to the view. So in simple terms, it's just that it's just number one, separating concern, making sure that this layer does what it's meant to do, and this layer does what it's meant to do, and this layer does what it's meant to do. Then attaching the single responsibility principle. Not only it does what it meant to do, but it has got some sort of a single responsibility. Like, it doesn't do a lot of things, it stick within that scope, making sure that it does that. So MVC stands for Model View Controller. Let's talk about how the words have been arranged. I'm not sure if there is some sort of an intention behind the words, like the alphabets, the arrangement MVC, because M stands for model, meaning that all the classes, instructions, and the pieces of code that relate to connecting to the database, you'll find them in the model. And then the controllers, that's all the information that is responsible for making complex decisions, and it's some sort of it's packed with intelligence. So that will be the controller. And the view, it's only for displaying the information. So I'm not sure if there is some sort of a significance in the arrangement, but when I'm explaining to you, I'm gonna be more practical in real life. I'm gonna use real life experience. When you are interacting with the application, you start interacting it with the view. So I'm not gonna start from explaining like a model, view, and a controller. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start from view, controller, and then model. Let's quickly talk about the relationship between these layers. As we now know that MVC, it's all about separating concerns. It's all about making sure that this layer does what it's supposed to do. So there is a model and the view, and there is a controller. So now let's talk about the relationship. I think there is no specific way. The MVC pattern doesn't dictate or doesn't declares that things must be done this way, but as long as you've separated the concern and these layers do what they do best, then I think that is all. It doesn't get into details as to how it's done. So the relationship might be the view will feed some information into the controller, for instance, to send the login details, and then the controller must talk to the model because the model is connected to the database. Then the controller might tell the model that, model, I want to check if I want to authenticate this user, that is this the correct user, and then so please give me the password so that I can verify. Then the model will provide the password and the controller will verify, and then after that it will send the answer back to the view. So as you can see that this channel is in such a way that the view only talks to the controller and the controller talks to the model, and the model talks back to the controller, not the view, and then the controller sends the information back to the view. That is the first arrangement. However, I had some people saying that the arrangement is not necessarily the relationship, like the order of the relationship. There are cases whereby the model does talk directly to the view in some cases. So the arrangement still, I would like to say it depends on you, but for me at this point in time, and also the accounting application that I'm busy developing, the one that I'm going to show you how I've applied the MVC, I've arranged it in such a way that the controller must make all the decision. So meaning that the controller must be the mediator between the view and the model. The model doesn't really have a connection to the view. If maybe by mistake I've done that, obviously I will fix that as you are watching, and we will see what best can work in case maybe I've made a mistake. But to me, if the view talks only to the controller and the controller talks to the model, so the view, the controller acting as a middleman between facilitating the communication, to me that works best. So MVC is like that. It has been a bit challenging for me to really grasp it more in terms of PHP, HTML, and database connection. It has not been easy, but finally I've watched a lot of video tutorial, and I've read a lot of books, and at least I was able to apply it. So when people are explaining it, they are too abstract. They use easy example of MVC, like they will say we've got a view that asks for a paragraph, then the controller will decide on getting the paragraph from the model and then displaying the paragraph. You'll find that conceptually you understand what MVC is, but practically it's not easy for you to apply it, because there is also file structure involved now. For instance, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna have files and name those files MMMMM and have a group of script which are called VVV, or you're gonna create some folders? There will be a folder structure. So the actual implementation is not that easy, or to me it hasn't been that easy, because I understood the concept, but when it comes to applying it on PHP, it was a bit of a mission, until I got a video that helped me to really understand. So I think by now at least you understand what MVC is. It's just separation of concern. Your layers must be separate, they must not be coupled together, so that if something breaks on the HTML, you only go to a certain folder and fix HTML. If something breaks on the logic or on the controller, you only go there and also fix. So now let's get into the code, so that I can show you my thought process behind it, and also how I would like to think I've manipulated it to work at my own advantage. So let's get into the code. Okay, getting into the code, I've got a folder app that has got everything. It has got everything for this application. And also just to mention, I'm running XAMPP, so for my PHP script, and the code editor that I'm using is Visual Studio Code. So all these things you can download from the internet. So I've got this folder application, and this is my folder structure. This is my folder structure. These are all the folders that are in here. So we are talking about MVC. Now let's go to this folder structure and look for MVC. Okay, obviously we don't have to use the order necessarily, because right close to this pointer I've got views. So I've got a folder with all my views. Okay, we've got models. These are all my models. And then we've got controllers. These are all my controllers. Okay, so now let's get into the file extension, or the files themselves. Views are just files, ordinary files that you are used to. For instance, in terms of this web application, my views will be HTML files, even if the extension might be .php, because inside PHP you can just type pure HTML, it will work. But the point is, the views are not separate files with, I'm not sure, with some unique attributes, because at some point when I was introduced into MVC, some people explained it in such a way that you feel like maybe the MVC pattern comes with a certain IDE, or it's some certain files that you need to learn. If maybe you are on developing for mobile application, you need to find out that you need to find the application that you are using to do your own, the language that you are using and the tools that you are using. What is the view there? In this case, the view is just HTML files. Maybe on React, on whatever platform that you are using, or Angular, maybe the views might be components, or because the user interface is rendered differently. So the point is, the views are just HTML files, something that you are used to, even if the extension might be PHP, but inside there is HTML. And then the models are just PHP script. The main idea behind MVC is that these PHP scripts are different from controllers in terms of the separation of concerns. The views, the models are concerned with a different thing than the controllers. That's the difference. So when we open these folders and you see the files, I want you to know that you're gonna see PHP script and classes. Just like here, you're gonna see PHP script and classes, nothing special, but these ones, make sure that they only deal with this type of problems, and the other one solves different types of problems, and then they are interacting with one another. So I hope that one is clear. In terms of file structure, I have folders for models, for views, and controllers. So meaning that whenever I need the view, all my views are here. Whenever I need the models, all my models are here. Whenever I need controllers, all my controllers are here. So as you can see, then now let's just quickly check what's inside the views. Okay, and also let me make a practical example so that things can be clear. So this login screen, it's a view. So where do I find this HTML file? Then here is that HTML file under login here. However, sorry about that. So when you look inside the views, maybe you were expecting a file, but in my case, hence I'm saying MVC doesn't really put some rules on what you think you can do, but however, it just governs the overall design of your code. So if you look inside my views, maybe you were expecting files, but inside the views I don't have files, I have folders. So meaning that when we talk of a login view, inside views you will find a folder. Why do I have folder instead of a file? This is the reason. Let me open login. Okay, based on my own file structure, to me it's convenient or easy if I can find a folder login that will have all the things necessary for that view to run. What are the things that are necessary for a view to run? Every HTML page needs a CSS file, more especially if the CSS is not embedded in that HTML file. Then again, the idea of separating things, extracting it from model, view, controller, and the separation of concern makes sense to me. So that's why it makes sense to have an external CSS that controls the view. So in order for the login screen to run smoothly, to display smoothly, it will need CSS, and also it will need JavaScript. So as I'm hovering here, you can see these animations. HTML doesn't do that. HTML is just a mock-up language, it displays, but however it needs some files that will help it to, I'm not sure, to be beautiful, to be styled, and also to be functional. So what I do inside my views, I have all those files that I need. Okay, so inside my views I've got my CSS for login, and I've got my JavaScript for login, and I have the PHP file, which is the actual view, the actual file that is going to be viewed. Let's just quickly check that. This is login, this is HTML. Okay, this is the bottom part of it. Then let's scroll up, as you can see. So let's just quickly prove that this view, this file is exactly this. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna come here where there is a logo. I'm just gonna delete this, save it, and run it again. As you can see, I don't have the logo. So this means that this is that HTML file. Remember, I'm not gonna get into the code at the moment, but we were just talking about what's inside the model and the views and the controllers. So I'm just going to be shallow at the moment. I will get in details when I'm analyzing this file. Okay, then I think that one is clear. So that means I've got the view, the HTML file, I've got the JavaScript, the one that controls that HTML. So here is it, which is I'm using jQuery. So if I can remove or comment a piece of this code, then that the behavior of this page will be different. Okay, the logo is back. And then also I've got the CSS. So inside my views, I've got a folder that has got 2 directories, that has got 2 folders for CSS and JavaScript or jQuery, and also I've got the HTML file. I hope that is clear. And then from then, let's go to models. Let's go to controllers, because this view file talks to controllers, not models. We'll go back to models later. So let's go to controllers. So also, okay, what I want you to notice is the naming convention. If I have got login here as a view, where is it? If I've got login here as a view, dot view, I'm suppose also here when I'm looking for a corresponding controller, it must be easier for me to find. Let's check that if that's the case. Do we have login here, and that corresponds to that login? Let's see login controller. So here, as you can see on my view, I've got dot on my views. Let me just open any view. I've got input dot view. Even on login, I've got login dot view. But in terms of controllers, I've got login dash controller. Let's quickly check that. Here is it. I've got login dash controller. Why the inconsistency? Why not, let's say, login dot controller? And remember, these are just the file names. There is nothing important about them. So if I'm saying login dot view, I'm just making it easier for me when I'm coming back to this code after a year. Just by looking at the files, I can have an idea, or I can see that this one is a view, this one is a controller, and this one is a model. So there's nothing special in those dots. There's no significance in those dot view and then dot PHP. So let me go back and explain it here so that it can be clear. So this file could be login.php. There will be nothing wrong about it. This dot doesn't mean it's a file extension, but it's just a naming convention so that I can know that this is a view. And also, it's not like something that I came up with. I've seen in a lot of YouTube tutorials and also in a lot of books suggesting that when you look at your file, at least I must be able to tell the content inside just by looking at it. I think that talks to a clean code, a code or a beautiful code, a code that explains itself, so that I won't need to have some text document explaining what these files are. For instance, inside this folder I have some views, inside this folder I have some controllers. So that's just a naming convention. So here my naming convention, it's a dot view. I wanted to continue with that convention, but however, when I was here on my controllers, now the naming of the file carried some extra tasks than just naming. And what are those tasks? In PHP, if you name a file login and you are interested on that file being automatically attached to the current script, automatically attached to the current script as soon as you create a new class from that file. Even what I'm explaining now, I will explain in detail if it doesn't really make sense. So when you want this file to be included, as soon as the class inside this file is being newed up, as soon as you say new login, and that login is inside this script login, this file will be attached automatically. It's called auto loading. So that technique makes it easier for you, so that you don't have to include files whenever you are instantiating them, the classes inside that file. So let me just go back a little bit and try to be slow and explain in detail. Let me just simplify this simplicity. I'm gonna look for a file that has got include. Where can I get it? Let me just look on main layout. Which file that might include? I think invoice might include an interface. Where's my invoice? This is invoice prep, but I'm looking for an invoice. No, just invoice only. Or quotation, invoice or quotation, invoice or quotation. Sorry about that. Quotation list controller. No. Okay. I think those classes are inside classes, not controllers, because they are just standalone classes. But here is invoice. Invoice is supposed to include a file, the one that has got an interface. Oh yeah, you see. So in PHP, if I've got this script, here is the script. It's invoice.php. But however, this script needs another script. There are some instructions that it will need which are in a different script. In this case, this is facecrude.php. So what you have to do, you have to require those files. Sometimes you would include, so you have to require those files. So requiring those files, it's like the system will go and take that file, open it, and make it available, and just replace this statement with that file, so that when we are using methods and whatever variables which are in that file, the system won't crash. So requiring or including is that thing. So this one, this is just a file, this is not a class. Inside this facecrude, there is a class which is an interface class, but that class I'm not gonna instantiate it, hence I am including it here. However, if here there was a class that I'm interested on saying, let's say fc, just an example, variable fc is equal to, let's say, new, in this class, new face crude. Then when I'm doing this without requiring or including this file, PHP will throw an error because this file is not visible here. So the idea is you have to require it. That means you are including it. Remember, I'm gonna new it up. I'm gonna instantiate this class. You see, as you can see that when I'm instantiating the class, the script name, the file name, and the file class that will be inside this file, they are the same. For this reason, whenever I'm creating a new instance of this, PHP on auto loading will ask itself that, okay, you are creating a new object. Before you create this new object, what are the things that you want to do? Then I will tell the auto loading that please require this file before you new up this object. If this doesn't make sense, please don't mind. I will explain it in details in a separate video. But what was the point was, here in controllers, here in my controllers, I have deviated from my file naming convention, which is dot, simply because this name now in controllers, as you can see, this name, if I copy this name, copy it, and open home controller, you will see a class with the exact name. Here is the class with the exact name. Control V, what I've copied there. Okay, this is what I was saying. Rename, copy this. So this is what I was saying. My shortcuts are not working. Let me paste manually. My pasting is not working. I don't know why. And at this point in time, I don't have time to know why. Maybe it's because I'm running a screen recording app, and then there is a clash in controls. Let's just not get into those details. So as you can see that this home controller, this class, the name of this class is exactly the same as this name. So when it comes to controllers now, I don't have much freedom on the file naming. I've got some limitation because this file name must be the same as the file as the file class. However, if now I'm creating a file, let's say I'm creating a class home dot controller, it becomes a bit of a problem. As you can see that this is, I hope you can see that this is green. Let me try to zoom it in. Control plus. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, as you can see that the file name, it's green. Okay, I think my computer is slow. My apologies about that. It takes time to respond. This name as a class name, it's green. As a class name, it's green. But however, here when I'm creating this class name dot, PHP gives me an error. PHP gives me an error. As you can see that there is a green name and there is a dot there, and after the dot, controller is what is white. What does that mean? It means that in every programming language there are certain rules that governs the creation of classes, the creation of function, and also the declaration of variable names, so, and class names and function names. So this is telling me that whenever you name a class, you don't have to use a dot, because in PHP that dot signifies something different, or it has got a special meaning into PHP, into the engine of PHP. Maybe PHP think that when you put a dot here, following there will be a method that you will call or whatever. So I had to break this naming convention. I didn't have a choice. And also I think maybe I could have, which is something that I'm going to do into the future, I could have resorted into changing it even here so that everything could be an underscore. But I'm happy that at least by now I think you know why I deviated from that naming convention. And the essence of this video tutorial, real life application in PHP, I want you to see the choices that the developer makes, why they are doing this, why now do I have to deviate from my consistency, why do I have to change things. So because of that, I had to change the variable naming convention. I hope this will go away, this red thing, because I don't have an error. Yes, okay. So let's go back to our controllers. So as you've seen that I've got a login controller, I've got a login view, I've got a corresponding login controller. Where do I find that? This is where I get it. The other takeaway here is that you must write a clean code, extensible, but also you must write a traceable code. When I'm looking at your code, at least I must be able to navigate it. You know, have you seen what's this thing? A Google map, or that map that you use maybe if you want to. Usually it used to be to sit in a car. It's a GPRS. I think it's a GPRS. You know, you put it in a car, and then if you want to go to town, you just type that. Or in these days, you just say the name of the town. Maybe take me to Johannesburg, and the map will appear there. Even I think on the smartphone that can happen. The map will appear there, and then there will be a dot that takes you to that place. When I'm saying you must have a traceable code, if I'm new to your code, I must be able to start from a point of interaction when the user press the button. From there, I will directly see the code that is executed because of that event. But make sure that I don't lose the whole process. For instance, if the user click this, then this function will be called. From here, this function will be called. From here, this function will be called. That's a traceable code. As soon as when you, even yourself, you are tracing your code and find out that now that you are here, you don't know which file corresponds to the other file, then it becomes a problem. For instance, if I could say here on my views, this is a login view, and then here I say the name will be authentication, then it's confusion already. I cannot directly trace. If I'm a developer, I know the MVC, I have seen that these are my views and the name of that file is login. Automatically in my mind, I feel like when I'm going to controller, I'm gonna see the same name. Makes it easier. It's just in me to know if it's an MVC pattern. So it's important to have a traceable code, a code that is easy to trace. Let me just quickly okay, let me not save the changes because I was just making an example. Okay, now let's get to the controllers. I'm done with why I deviated from the dot convention here, and then now we've got the login controller. So as you can see, this is a class. This is a class. It's a controller. It's a class. It doesn't have the HTML here. As you can see inside PHP, you can write pure HTML. As you can see here, there is no HTML, and also not only there is no HTML, there is no code that relates to a model or that relates to querying from the database. As you can see, what's in here, I've got a login controller, a class with the same name as this one. I've already explained why. Extends abstract controllers. It extends it has got a parent class called abstract controllers. When we get into object oriented programming inheritance, then I will explain in details about that extend, and I will go to that class to show you what's going on there. But what I'm trying to say is, you can see that this class is a controller. It controls. It also extends from its parent class. It's a controller, and then from here it has got some variables, and then function prepare data. Then that's where it has got a function prepare data, which is this function is not in this class, it's in this class, the one that it's extending. Obviously this is inheritance. I will explain that later, but the point here is that this class, what it does, it has got a function prepare data. It receives an array, and then it just say this db data, and then this is just a test, you see. So what's going on in this function, the reason why I'm commenting this instruction, is not that useful. It's not an instruction that works in the code, but it was just helping me to say that this, it's like I was testing that this from create controller named login. This is just a test. So this class, the majority of its instructions, it inherits them from the parent class. Its inheritance, same difference. It has got a parent class, and then most of its instructions are there in a parent class. And then here, what it does, I think, it only okay, so this class is login controller, abstract controller, extending from the parent class, abstract controller, and then it has got this function prepare data, and that is it. So as you can see that this function only deals with it only deals with information that relates specifically to the controller. So this function doesn't do much rather than performing the instructions that it will, the method that it will inherit from its controller, its parent class. So but however, the point now, or the main important thing at the moment, is that this class is just clean. It doesn't have the HTML. So we are done with the controller. Okay, then we can close controllers. Now let's go to the model. Let's go to the model, to the folder model. Let me close my classes. Let's go to the models. Where are my models? Here are my models. So obviously, if this the view, login view, has got the login controller, it must have a login model. So let's check for that login model. Here is a login model. So as you can see that this is the login model. Obviously it's a PHP file, but everything that is in here has got something to do with querying information from the database and returning it back to where, and back to the controller. Let's quickly check that. Here is a constructor, and then there is a function here, get data. As you can see, this get data returns this database.read. As you can see that this brings back all users. So this is a query, select all from users. So that's a query from the database. We are querying the database here, but however, we are not querying the database directly. This instruction is not the instruction that queries directly to the database, as you can see. But however, I will explain later in all the details as to what happens here, why there is a database class that has got a method read. The method read accept an array of two variables, which at position 0 there is a string, and at position number 0 and position 1 there is a string. That one I will explain it later, but I want you to get an idea that this only deals with querying the information from the database and returning it, and that's all. It's concerned about that. Okay, now I think you've got an idea of what's going on. So it's like every file is grouped into 3 files. It's gonna be the view, the model, and the controller. The view, the controller, and the model. So it's like the interface that you see. and then there will be an intelligent module, which is the controller, which organizes all the information that the view will need, and then it will return it back to the view. So it's like we are being drilled to think in threes. So now, what are you gaining from this model view controller thing? What's the point then? Yeah, I can see that the control the view, it's a standalone file, the controller is a standalone file, and the model, it's a standalone file. Then to answer that, I'm gonna show you practically how that can help you into your code in terms of making changes and also in terms of making things easier for you. Let's log in. Okay, now we're gonna examine this feature of this system of having different layouts. For instance, if you click here, this is the modern layout of the system. If you click here, you can see that the layout changes. It changes. So one might think that, okay, I've got a file, an HTML file. Let me just open any HTML. So one might think that I've got one HTML file that has got a code, HTML code for those two layouts, meaning that maybe there will be a code for layout 1, let's say, and also a code for layout 2, let's say, a layout 2. So, and then this same code will then decide through PHP which one to run. That will be a solution, but in that solution you will, as you can see, that number one, there is tight coupling. The control, the decision about which layout to be loaded and what not, it's still in the same file, and that's a problem. According to principle, that's a problem. So we need also not to identify that as a problem according to good programming practices or principle, but even in actual implementation, we have to see and actually witness why it is a problem, or how separating the concern can make our life easier. Because the challenge with programming principles and solid principle and all other principles around constructing object and also making your code better or helping you to become a better developer, you understand them conceptually when somebody is explaining. But however, if you go into the practicality of it and do your own code and experience and see how they improve their lives, I think you start to understand them better. You start to get an insight as to why you have to follow the good programming practices, why you have to separate concern, why your classes and method must have single responsibilities. So one might think we've got one file, and in that file we can say, if let's say the deciding variable of the layout is this, then you execute this on the same file. But however, here I didn't do it that way. So let's see how I've done it. Okay, let me close this one. I don't need it. In fact, let me close everything here. Let me close everything here. Okay, so the way I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna trace it from the UI so that we can take it step by step, so that we cannot miss any step. In doing so, we will also check if is this code that I've written so far traceable. What are the mistakes? What are the things that we have to fix? So how we can do that is to come here and look at this, because this is the radio button that triggers the event. So we're gonna start from where the event is being triggered in jQuery, and then we're gonna follow it through until it goes back to the back end to PHP, and when it comes back again. So This is going to give us a 360 degrees of the MVC pattern. Okay, first of all, we need to know what's the ID of that radio button. We need to know what's the ID of that radio button. Okay, let's just copy this ID. Excuse me for that. Copy this. Okay, and then from there, here is the JavaScript code for that event. As you can see that as I'm approaching this code, I'm not approaching this code as like somebody who knows it at the back of my mind. I've been working on this code for some time, so obviously I've forgotten about it and about a lot of things. But however, the purpose of this video is exactly for that, to show you the behind the scene on how do you struggle with the code that you have written if it's written carelessly. As I've told you that I'm transitioning from writing a code randomly or just writing solutions to write an extensible code, a meaningful code, so that I can become a better developer. So let's continue.